Carrie Mathers' suicide note was a lie. I wish I never read it. Carrie Mathers' suicide note was a lie. I wish I never read it. It was 2009 when Carrie Mathers was found dead in the woods behind Havenwood High. Overdose. Textbook case, the cops said. I was a freshman, she was a senior. We barely knew each other, though I harbored a stupid, silent crush on her. The kind that makes your palms sweat when they call your name in class. 15 years went by. 15 years of moving away, moving back. Settling into a soul-crushing accounting job, marrying Sarah, and trying to forget the hollow feeling I got every time someone mentioned Havenwood. Carrie's death was always a part of that hollow feeling, a little shard of ice lodged somewhere near my ribs. Then last week, I was mindlessly scrolling through a true crime forum. Someone had uploaded a high-resolution scan of Carrie's suicide note, never released to the public before the caption boasted. Curiosity, or maybe morbid fascination, got the better of me. The note itself was what you'd expect. Rambling, self-deprecating, filled with teenage angst and a desperate plea for forgiveness. I skimmed it, ready to close the tab and move on with my life, but something stopped me. A word, shadows. It was placed oddly in the sentence, I can't escape the shadows anymore. They're always watching. Shadows always watching, always. Why repeat the word always? It felt off. I zoomed in. Pixel by pixel. The paper looked old, brittle. The handwriting was definitely Carrie's. I remembered it from the few times she'd written notes to friends in class. But the ink density seemed different in that one phrase, lighter, as if it had been added later. Sarah walked into the room. What are you looking at? Carrie's suicide note, I said without looking up. Danny, seriously, it's been 15 years. Let it go. I think it might be fake, or at least altered. I showed her the screen, pointing out the repetition and the ink discrepancy. She squinted. Danny, that's a stretch. You're seeing things. Maybe, I admitted, but what if I'm not? That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of the note kept flashing behind my eyelids, the misplaced words, the subtle differences in ink. I felt like I was on the verge of something, a revelation that had been hidden for years. The next morning, I called the Havenwood Police Department. Miraculously, I got through to Detective Michael Riley, the lead investigator on Carrie's case. He was retired now, but he agreed to meet me. Riley was a gruff, weary man with eyes that had seen too much. I laid out my theory, showing him the scan of the note. He listened patiently, his expression unchanging. Son, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, he said finally. But Carrie Mathers was a clear-cut case of suicide. We interviewed everyone. We examined the evidence. There was no foul play. But the note, I protested. Teenagers write strange things, Mr. Hayes. Grief does funny things to people. You're grasping at straws. I left the police station feeling deflated. Riley's dismissal only fueled my obsession. I spent the next few days poring over old newspaper articles, obituaries, anything I could find about Carrie's life. She'd been popular, involved in school activities. But there were whispers, too. Rumors of her being troubled, withdrawn in the weeks leading up to her death. Some said she'd been dabbling in things. Witchcraft. The occult. Small-town gossip, I told myself. Then I found Mrs. Mathers' address. I drove to her house. It was a small, dilapidated bungalow on the edge of town, the lawn overgrown, the paint peeling. Mrs. Mathers was a ghost of a woman, her eyes hollow, her voice barely a whisper. I introduced myself, explaining that I was a former classmate of Carrie's. I'm so sorry for your loss, I said, the words feeling inadequate. She just stared at me, her gaze unsettlingly intense. It never goes away, she whispered. Never. I asked her about the note, if she remembered anything about it. She became agitated, her hands trembling. I don't want to talk about it, she said, her voice rising. Please just leave. Before I left, I asked one more question. Was she involved in anything strange? Anything occult? Her eyes widened with fear. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my house that night, the nightmares started. Vivid, disturbing dreams of Carrie standing in the woods, her eyes black, her mouth open in a silent scream. Shadows lurking in the trees, watching me. I needed to talk to someone who knew Carrie, someone who might have seen something. I remembered Mark Olson. He was always quiet, observant, a loner. But he was in Carrie's friend group, always on the periphery. I found him on social media. He was living in another state, working as a park ranger. I sent him a message, explaining my suspicions. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. I always thought something was wrong with that whole thing, he wrote. Carrie wasn't the type to kill herself. She was scared of something or someone. I pressed him for details. He hesitated, then agreed to talk on the phone. There were rumors, he said, about a group, a secret society. They met in the woods, did things. Carrie got involved for a while, then tried to get out. That's when she started acting weird. What kind of things? I asked, my heart pounding. I don't know exactly. Rituals, I guess. Something to do with the old families in Havenwood. They have a lot of power, a lot of influence. He told me about symbols, strange symbols that Carrie had drawn in her notebook. Symbols he'd seen carved into trees in the woods near the high school. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole. This couldn't be real. It was just a small town, not some gothic horror movie. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Emily Carter listened patiently to my story, nodding occasionally. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "you're clearly experiencing a great deal of distress. It sounds like you're developing an obsessive fixation on Carrie Mathers' death. You need to be careful. Confirmation bias is a powerful thing. You're looking for evidence to support your theory, and you're finding it, even if it's not really there." She prescribed me anti-anxiety medication and urged me to stop investigating. But I couldn't. I had to know the truth. I decided to break into the high school archives. I knew it was reckless, but I needed to see Carrie's school records, her yearbooks, anything that might shed light on her life. It was easier than I thought. The security was lax. I found Carrie's file in a dusty cardboard box. Inside were her grades, her attendance records, and a few examples of her artwork. One drawing caught my eye. It was a sketch of the woods, the same woods where she'd been found dead. But hidden within the trees were the symbols Mark Olson had described. Faint, almost invisible, but there. On the back of the drawing, scrawled in pencil, was a message: "They are watching. Tell no one." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was it. Proof. Carrie hadn't killed herself. She'd been silenced. I drove to the house of Mayor Thornton. His family was one of the oldest and most powerful in Havenwood. Mark had mentioned them specifically. I confronted him with my evidence, the note, the drawings, everything. He listened without interrupting, face impassive. "Mr. Hayes," he said when I was finished, "you're clearly disturbed. I suggest you seek professional help. As for these allegations, they are completely baseless." He denied everything, of course, but I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew. As I left his house, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Two men in dark suits were watching me. They looked like they belonged to the FBI, but there was something off about them. Something predatory. I drove home, my hands shaking. Sarah was waiting for me. "Danny, what's going on?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "We have to leave Havenwood," I said. "Now, it's not safe here." "What are you talking about? Carrie Mathers was murdered, Sarah, and the people who did it are still here. They're watching me." She looked at me like I was crazy. "Danny, you're scaring me. You need to stop this. You're going to get hurt." I tried to explain to make her understand, but she just shook her head. "I can't do this anymore, Danny. I can't live like this. I'm leaving." She packed a bag and walked out the door. I watched her go, feeling numb. I'd lost everything, my wife, my sanity, maybe even my life. That night I went back to the woods. I had to see the ritual site for myself. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't stop. The woods were dark and silent. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. I followed the path Mark Olson had described, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I found it, a clearing in the trees, a circle of stones surrounding a fire pit. Carved into the trees were the symbols from Carrie's drawing. The air felt heavy, oppressive. As I stood there staring at the ritual site, I heard a noise behind me, a rustling in the bushes. I turned around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Two figures emerged from the shadows, the men in black suits. They weren't FBI agents, they were something else, something inhuman. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. Their smiles were too wide, too sharp. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them said, his voice a low growl. "You know too much." I tried to run, but they were too fast. They grabbed me, dragged me into the center of the circle. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes of pain, of chanting, of darkness. I felt like I was being torn apart, body and soul. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground, alone. The sun was rising. The woods were silent. I staggered to my feet, my body aching, my mind reeling. I looked around, trying to make sense of what had happened. Then I saw it. Carved into my arm, just below my wrist, was one of the symbols from the trees, the same symbol that had been in Carrie's drawing. I stared at it, my blood running cold. I understood now. I hadn't just uncovered a murder. I'd stumbled upon something far more sinister, something ancient, something evil. The note wasn't just a forgery to hide a murder. It was a beacon, a summoning. I walked to the edge of the woods and looked back at Havenwood. The town looked peaceful, innocent. But I knew the truth. It was a lie. As I stared at the town, a strange feeling came over me. A feeling of acceptance, a sense of belonging. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was one of them now. The shadows weren't watching me. They were welcoming me home. I'm still in Havenwood. Sarah never came back. Riley's investigation stalled out mysteriously. No one talks about Carrie Mathers anymore. Sometimes I walk into the woods. The symbols on the trees seem to glow in the moonlight. I can hear the chanting. I can feel the power. And I know with chilling certainty that Carrie's suicide note wasn't just a lie. It was an invitation. And I, like her, have finally accepted.